Right now, a parasite is causing explosive diarrhea for thousands of people and spreading rapidly across the United States. It's turning into a major food safety problem as people are getting it even from eating lettuce or salads and cold food out at restaurants. These parasite infections have now rapidly spread across 31 states, and the people most likely to land in a hospital bed are older adults, people who are over 65. Out of concern for people's health and safety, I did hours of research and made this video to help keep you and your loved ones safe, and I learned several interesting things that I will get into in this video. The reason this outbreak may be far bigger than the official account admits may trace back to a quiet decision made inside a government office in 2025, and there is one common and inexpensive antibiotic that can clear it in about a week. There's also a whole industry of parasite cleanse remedies that clears nothing but your wallet, and I'm going to show you exactly which is which, and the entire science of catching parasites like this one. It began all the way in the 1600s when a curious man in Holland pointed a homemade lens at his own diarrhea and saw something swimming. Stay with me here, because after this video, you're going to walk away knowing way more about this outbreak than most people know, even at your doctor's office, and I mean that literally, because this parasite is famous for slipping past the standard tests. This is Dr. Thomas, a Johns Hopkins and NIH-funded caregiving researcher and the CEO of CareIAA. I've helped thousands of families navigate aging, dementia, and serious illness. I'm not a clinician, but a leading researcher and innovator in caregiving. And when a foodborne outbreak like this hits, that quietly targets the exact people we care for, older adults, the frail, the immunocompromised. It lands squarely in my world. So here's my promise to you. By the end of this video, you'll know what this parasite actually is, and the genuinely bizarre reason it can't spread from person to person. The warning signs that separate it from ordinary food poisoning. Who in your family is truly at risk? The one treatment that works and four that don't. The truth about natural antiparasitics, and honestly, and the uncomfortable question of why now that I'll hand you straight without bias. If you have an older parent, a spouse, or a neighbor who eats salad or even cold food, please do one thing for me right now. Share this video with them. It could keep someone you love out of the emergency room this summer. So let's get into it. The parasite is called Cyclospora cayetanensis. Say that name, and even seasoned doctors and nurses will pause. It's a single-cell coccidian parasite, a distant cousin of a bug that causes illness in chickens, and of Cryptosporidium, the one that shut down Milwaukee's water supply back in the 1990s. By the way, I had to look up how to pronounce some of these words. So now the strange part here, when someone is infected and sheds this parasite in their stool, what comes out is not yet infectious. The parasite has to sit in the outside environment, in soil or on produce or in water, for roughly 1 to 2 weeks to ripen, to sporulate, before it can infect the next person. That's well proven, and it has an interesting, beautifully reassuring consequence for caregivers because fresh stool isn't contagious. This parasite essentially cannot spread person to person, so if you're caring for someone who has it, you will not catch it from them by being in the same house, hugging them, or even cleaning up after them. Now contrast that with norovirus, which was a virus that was spreading rapidly in prior years, which rips through nursing homes like wildfire. Thankfully, this one doesn't, and that single fact will lower a lot of anxiety in a caregiving household. So hold on to it. So how do we even know parasites like this exist? In the 1670s, a Dutch draper named Antony van Leeuwenhoek, a fabric merchant, not a trained scientist, ground glass lenses so fine he could see a world that no human had ever seen. He looked at pond water and found tiny creatures swimming in them and called them animalcules. He is rightly called the father of microbiology. But here's an interesting part they leave out of the polite textbooks. In 1681, van Leeuwenhoek came down with a nasty case of diarrhea, and instead of just suffering through it like a normal person, he examined his own stool under that lens and described a tiny organism swimming what he called prettily with what he called Little pause. Historians are now confident that what he saw was Giardia, the first human parasite ever observed by a human eye. Think about that. The entire science of tracking these bugs in our gut, the science that could protect your family this summer, began with one man's curiosity about his own diarrhea. If you love that kind of hidden history, subscribe now because I cover topics like this regularly and I find them personally very fascinating. Cyclospora itself is a much newer discovery. It wasn't formed, described in people until 1979 and wasn't even named until the 1990s. And I'll come back to how it got its name because there's an interesting Johns Hopkins connection and a genuine medical mystery attached to it. But first, what is this thing actually doing across 31 states right now? I think this is one of the most shocking parts. As of July 2026, the CDC has confirmed 843 domestically acquired cases across 31 states, with more than 1,500 additional suspected cases still being sorted out, and 86 people hospitalized. But let me give you some useful context here. There have been no reported deaths. Most people recover, and CDC counts always lag real life by about 6 weeks. So the true number may be almost certainly much higher than the official tally. I'll come back to the why this official number is so slippery this year, because I think that's one of the most important parts of this whole story. The epicenter is Michigan, and this is a statistic that should make you wake up. Michigan's chief medical executive, Dr. Natasha Bagdasarian, told reporters the state normally sees 40 to 50 cases of cyclosporisis a year. This year, already over 1,500. That's roughly 30 times the normal load in a single state. Ohio has hundreds more, so when you add these states together, the aggregated tally is already pushing 3,000 people sickened. Now here's something I want you to sit with because I think it's genuinely unusual. In a typical outbreak, investigators eventually point to a food like the cilantro, the bag salad, the raspberries. As of this recording, they haven't. No common food source has been identified yet, and no cyclosporware recall has been issued. I think that's rare, and it matters, and I'll explain what it likely means in this video. So, which foods has this parasite been linked to before? That list is important and worth memorizing. Fresh raspberries, fresh basil, cilantro, pre-cut bag salad mixes, snow peas, snap peas, blackberries, and leafy greens like romaine. For years, Americans assumed this was strictly an imported produce problem, but in July 2019, the FDA confirmed cyclospora for the first time in slanter grown right here in the U.S. So the comforting story that it only comes from far away, that's no longer true. And notice the pattern in this food list. Every single one is something we eat raw. Hold on to that thought, because it's the key to protecting your family. And I'll give you the practical checklist near the end. So how do you know if this is what you got or your loved one got versus just a run-of-the-mill stomach bug? I think this is where cyclosporasis reveals its personality. The hallmark is watery diarrhea, often frequent, often explosive, plus loss of appetite, real weight loss, cramping, bloating, gas, nausea, and a deep fatigue. Fever, if it shows up at all, is usually pretty low. But here's the tell that separates it from ordinary food poisoning. And Dr. Bagdasarian pointed to exactly this. Bacterial food poisoning tends to hit you within hours and burn out fast. Cyclospore is a slow and patient villain. It usually takes sometimes up to a week after you eat the contaminated food before symptoms even begin. And left untreated, it doesn't pass in a day or two. It can drag on for weeks, sometimes more than a month, in a maddening, relapsing, remitting pattern. You feel better, you think it's over, then it comes roaring back. If you had a bout of diarrhea, and then you thought you beat it, and then it came back, that is a red flag to get yourself tested. Now, who is truly at risk here? The parasite is dangerous in direct proportion to how fragile the person is. Young children, the immunocompromised cancer patients, and the group I cover the most, older adults. Dr. Luis Marcos, an infectious disease physician at Stony Brook, put it plainly. The primary danger here isn't the parasite itself. It's the dehydration from the prolonged watery diarrhea. And he explained why older adults are so invulnerable. They're more likely to have underlying medical conditions and to take medications that affect fluid balance. Dr. William Schaffner at Vanderbilt said essentially the same thing. The major hazard is dehydration, and it's most dangerous at the extremes of age and in people living with chronic illness. So let me make that concrete, because dehydration sounds mild. It isn't, not here. In an older adult, days of fluid loss can quickly spiral into electrolyte imbalances, acute kidney injury, dangerous weakness, dizziness, and this is the one I'm most attuned to: falls. A parasite in a salad could become a broken hip, could become a hospital admission. That could become a permanent loss of independence. I think that's real stakes for our caregiving community, and the hospitalization rate in this outbreak is running at about 10%. Dehydration is the real reason. So, when do you call the doctor? Watery diarrhea lasting more than a couple days, or relapsing, or following a possible bad produce exposure, and any sign of dehydration, dizziness, dry mouth, little or dark urine, confusion, a racing heart, or not being able to keep fluids down. In a frail older adult, do not wait it out. And when you call, I'm going to give you a very specific script to say to that doctor in a minute, because it can change the entire outcome. So this is the part that I found especially interesting, because the moment an outbreak like this makes the news, the internet floods with natural antiparasitic cures: wormwood, black walnut, oregano oil, garlic, berberine, papaya seeds, clove, sold as parasite cleanses. So let me tell you the truth and grade these, honestly, the way I'd want to tell my own mother. Here's the bottom line, and I want it to be unmistakable. There's no yet published human study, none, showing that any of these herbal remedies treats cyclosporin people. The CDC's recommended treatment guidance doesn't list a single herb, not even as an experimental option. You know, and you may be thinking, but Neil, I've seen studies. So let me walk you through actual studies and evidence, because it is more interesting than just the hype. Berberine, the compound in golden seal and barberry, genuinely showed activity against Giardia in a study in the 1970s in a pediatric journal. It was a real study, but that's Giardia. It's a completely different kind of parasite, and that was in children, almost 50 years ago. For Cyclospora, preliminary at best, but possibly no impact. I think it's still interesting and worth doing more research on. Wormwood gives one of the great stories in medicine. In 1972, a Chinese scientist named Tu Yoyo, combing through ancient texts, isolated a compound from sweet wormwood, Artemisia annua, that became artemisinin. Today, the backbone of malaria treatment worldwide. She won the Nobel Prize in 2015. That's strong evidence. But for malaria caused by Plasmodium, and using a purified concentrated drug in combination therapy, not wormwood tea, and not against Cyclospora. Nonetheless, I still think it's an interesting concept that merits research. Some of these herbs, like artemisinin, berberine, garlic, oregano oil, have shown activity against Diarrhea, the parasite that causes coccidosis in poultry. And Diarrhea is Cyclospora's closest relative, so close that scientists actually use it as a laboratory stand-in for Cyclospora, so the herb sellers could be potentially right. But every one of those studies is in a test tube or in animals like chickens, pigs, cell cultures, in vitro, in vivo, and livestock. So I would grade the value of these as preliminary and only in surrogates. Not one has yet been shown to cure a human being of cyclosporasis. And here's why I think this can potentially hurt someone you love. The danger of cyclosporase is, in an older adult, is dehydration. So if a frail 80-year-old skips the proven antibiotic and drinks bitter herbal tinctures for 3 weeks while the watery diarrhea grinds on, they aren't doing something neutral, but they could be running straight towards the exact complications I warned about. Dehydration, kidney injury, a fall. Those things can land people in the hospital. Meanwhile, on a positive side, there is a proven treatment that's cheap and a decades-old antibiotic that usually works within a couple days. Hydration, I think, genuinely matters. Fluids and electrolytes. That part of folk wisdom is right. But a parasite cleanse is not a guaranteed treatment, and it's a substitute for the thing that actually works, and for our caregiving community, that substitution can be dangerous. If you find this content helpful, please subscribe because detailed answers are the whole point, and share this segment specifically with anyone in your life, who's thinking through, what type of ways to deal with this. So, what actually does work? The proven treatment is an antibiotic called trimethoprim sulfametoxidil. You may know it by the brand Bactrim or even Septra. For a typical adult, that's usually one double-strength tablet twice a day for 7 days, sometimes up to 10 days. The efficacy is strong. It's been the standard for 30 years, and most people with healthy immune systems feel dramatically better within a few days. It's inexpensive. It's on every pharmacy shelf, and it works. But 2 honest caveats here. First, if you're allergic to sulfa drugs, and many people are, the CDC is blunt. No highly effective alternative has been yet proven. Ciprofloxacin is a reasonable second choice, but less effective, as it has moderate Evans. Nitazoxanide is used when sulfa is an option, but it's supported mostly by scattered case reports. So a sulfa allergy is a real conversation to have with your doctor. Second, never reach for over-the-counter anti-diarrheal medicines without asking first, because they can actually trap the parasite in you and prolong the illness. Now, the part that could genuinely change an outcome in your family, and it's what I meant when I said doctors often can't see this thing. Cyclospora is notorious for slipping past standard testing. A routine stool test frequently misses it. Several of the common lab panels don't even look for it, and because the parasite is shed intermittently, a single stool sample can come back clean, even when someone's infected. They may need to submit samples on different days, so here's your script and the specific words to say to your doctor. Don't just say, having diarrhea. Say, given the current cyclospora outbreak, can we specifically test for cyclospora using a modified acid-fast strain or a stool PCR panel that includes it? I just think that one sentence tells the doctor to order the right test instead of the default one. In a 2013 outbreak, one of the modern molecular panels flagged cyclospora for a full week before conventional methods caught it. A week in a dehydrating family member can mean everything. So write that sentence down, put it on the fridge, whatever you have to. Now let's talk prevention. I have to start by demolishing a comfortable myth because I'd rather you have the truth. Many of you are just thinking, oh, I'll just wash everything really well. Sadly, I wish that were important enough, and it's not. What's important here is cyclospora oocysts cling tightly to produced surfaces, and they're especially good at hiding in little crevices of things like bumpy fruit, raspberries, etc. Washing reduces the parasite, but it does not reliably remove it. Interestingly, chlorine and the usual sanitizers don't kill it either. So the produce wash, you trust it may be helpful, but it's not completely protective. And it brings me to the interesting history of these findings. In the spring of 1996, North America was hit by the largest cyclosporosis outbreak ever reported. Back then, nearly 1,465 confirmed cases across the U.S. and Canada. Investigators first blamed California strawberries. The strawberry industry took a devastating and completely undeserved hit before scientists cracked the case. It was really coming from imported Guatemalan raspberries. The parasite had been riding in on imported berries all along. The FDA eventually banned fresh Guatemalan raspberry imports in 1998. That 1996 raspberry mystery is why we know raspberries are such a stubborn carrier and why just wash it was never going to be the whole answer. So history, once again, could be a good guiding manual for right now. So, what may actually protect your family? Cooking. Cooking is your best friend. Heat kills the parasite, so leafy greens and herbs are the safest cook. During an active outbreak like this one, favor whole heads of lettuce over pre-washed bag mixes and discard the outer 2 or 3 leaves. Wash produce under running water anyway, it still helps. Sanitize your cutting boards and counters. Wash your hands before and after handling produce. And one more for the travelers in the audience. This parasite is endemic in parts of Latin America and South Asia, Guatemala, Peru, Mexico, even Nepal. In fact, about a third of U.S. cases historically involve international travel in 2 weeks prior to symptoms. In those regions, avoid untreated water and raw produce completely. And remember, chlorine won't save you. So bottled water or filtered water is the rule. The question all of this begs is why now? Why are we having this outbreak? And I'm going to hand you the documented facts. Let the experts speak from every side, and then tell you honestly where this certainty ends. And this isn't a political question for me. This is a caregiving question. So here are the facts. In mid-2025, the CDC scaled back its foodborne surveillance network called FoodNet and made cyclosporin reporting optional, reducing the pathogens it actually tracks down to just essentially 2, Salmonella and E. coli, citing funding. Over the same period, federal food safety agencies saw significant staffing reductions and some layoffs that were later reversed. A key FSMA food traceability rule, one designed to help investigators trace a contaminated food back to its source fast, was postponed by about 30 months, and the FDA's foreign food facility inspections hit a historic low in 2025. These are documented facts, not political opinions. Now the experts from different corners, Donald Schaffner, a food microbiologist at Rutgers, was asked directly whether the cuts caused this outbreak. His honest answer was, "It's unclear, but could we have learned earlier? Could we be finding out more?" On the other side, a CDC branch chief, Dr. Diana Blau, said there's been no difference in how Cyclosporia's cases are handled at the agency recently. A former 30-year DDC veteran compared losing behind-the-scenes support staff to a smartphone that looks fine on the outside but has lost its operating system. A consumer safety advocate used the word collapse, and the administration's official position is that the cuts targeted administrative and bureaucratic roles, not frontline inspectors. So where does that leave us, honestly? I think no one has proven that any of these changes caused or worsened this specific outbreak. But what we can fairly say is narrower and I think more useful when you track fewer pathogens and trace food more slowly. Outbreaks may be spotted later or counted less thoroughly. Remember how I said the official number is slippery and no food source has been identified? That's the connection worth making here, and I think that's a capacity question. When you make a parasite optional to report, you partly blind yourself to how big it could be and how big this outbreak really is. I think that's a sober, nonpartisan reading here, and it's exactly why you knowing what to ask your doctors matters more this year, not less. So let me now bring this home for the people actually doing the caregiving. Here's your checklist and what could be very practically beneficial. 1. Dehydration is enemy. Watch for dizziness, dry mouth, dark or scant urine, confusion and weakness, and push fluids and electrolytes. 2. Know the medication angle. Older adults on diuretics or blood pressure drugs or with kidney disease or diabetes are more vulnerable to fluid swings, and the treatment antibiotic itself interacts with blood thinners like warfarin or some other medicines. So make sure the prescriber has their full medication list. Check with the pharmacist. This is general pharmacology worth confirming. 3. If the symptoms drag on or relapse, escalate with that sentence. Please test specifically for Cyclospora. 4. In the kitchen, cook produce whenever you can. Skip bag salads during the outbreak and buy just whole heads of lettuce. And 5. The reassurance. You will not catch this from the person that you're caregiving for. Also, here are the free resources, and write them down. The CDC's website and FDA's outbreak pages. Follow those for latest verified numbers. Foodsafety.gov for recalls. Dial 211 for local help with food and daily needs. And the Elder Care Locator 1-800-677-1116 which has connected families to local aging services since the 90s, fields about 400,000 requests a year. They'll link you to meals, in-home help, caregiver support in your local community. Also, your local area agency on aging can do the same. I want to leave you with one image. 340 years ago, a curious man in Holland looked at the smallest, most private, most unglamorous part of being human. And by paying honest attention, he opened a door to understanding that is protecting your family this very summer. That's the whole job, really. Just pay honest attention, ask the questions, keep water and fluids close, and check on the people who might be too proud or too tired to check on themselves. Check on your loved ones. If this helped you, do 2 things that'll keep this work alive. Subscribe so other families can benefit from these briefings, and share this with one person who eats salad and who would never think a raspberry could send them to the hospital. That share might be the real reason that they stay home this summer instead of in a hospital bed. I'm Dr. Thomas. Take care of yourself, take care of your family, take care of your loved ones, and I'll see you in the next one.